Hello, welcome to Humanized Families, a project of Risk Community Foundation. I'm your host, Ofoma Odebala, a registered social worker. Today we are asking the question, what is lateral violence? The outline for presenting this topic includes a brief reintroduction of the initiative of Humanized Families, our goal, clarifying the definition of lateral violence, spending some time unpacking what it looks like, its impact, and our typical coping responses. Also, recognize the loss and grief associated with lateral violence and present a couple of call-outs. One, to encourage us to build our capacity to do better, also to join the conversation. Risk Community Foundation is an African family-inspired human rights and social justice organization. This project is considered a conversation prompt initiative as we share research and evidence-informed lived experiential information with you. We expect to challenge perspectives. In doing so, we hope to promote healing and abilities to thrive, dismantle oppression while building safe, peaceful, and just society. In so doing, this lateral violence discourse that I'm introducing is to promote reflection, understanding, and healing, to move us to a place where we begin to humanize each other, and to provide foundation for illustrative case studies to follow. As a society, we are all familiar with structural injuries and damage done to groups of people. How we deal with societal legacy of injury, I would encourage you to think MAPA, because for you to begin to heal, you need to understand how you got there or how it presents in your particular situation. Think MAPA. M represent remembering that we are all dealing with multi-generational trauma with combined oppression, because the oppression is still ongoing. Also, there is absence of healing opportunities as each one of us are left to our own devices in the neoliberal society within which we all live. P, to recognize that Dr. DeGroot actually has a theory that provides an interesting insight into the dynamic. And finally, for us to take active steps to heal and replace negative adaptive survivor behaviors and attitudes with positive ones. It's not going to happen without intentional action. So what's post-traumatic slave syndrome? According to Dr. DeGroot, theory explains the root cause of adaptive survivor behaviors by Africans to chattel slavery and systemic racism that continued post-slavery abolition. Specifically, I want to focus on the negative adaptive survivor behavior, which she explains results to vacuum esteem, as in insufficient development, where trauma prevents individuals, children, as they grow from their developmental goals. It leads to feelings of hopelessness, depression, and self-destructive outlook. She also talked about the marked propensity for anger and violence, including lateral violence. She goes on to share issues around racist socialization / internalized racism, manifesting variously as learned helplessness, distorted self-concept, deep dislike for one's own cultural identity, cultural group, or heritage. I would really want to just cap this up by saying, for one things to be different, we need to be the change we want to see in the world around us, and we need to work towards adopting positive survivor attributes and behaviors. Ecological perspective of loss really just remind us about this structural piece and how it connects to every level of society to us as a human being. So from being treated as less than human, the society as a whole loses, just as the community does, and the family unit do suffer losses, as well as the individual within those family units. And these losses and the attendant grief feed on each other, in particular when we're talking about negative adaptive behavior. So what is lateral violence? Lateral violence is a tendency of people of oppressed group to direct their frustration and anger from their experiences of oppression at members of their own group. Dog-eat-dog kind of thing going on. To emphasize, lateral violence is violence that is done in a way and in a manner that actually effectively reinforces, perpetuates, and exacerbates existing disadvantages, and usually done with an element of recklessness or indifference. The literature identifies lateral violence as prevalent within the Black community and indigenous community, as well as in the nursing profession, where the phrase eating their young is used. Lateral violence as a phenomenon is a specific type of violence directed at people of similar background, so the perpetrator and the victim typically share similar characteristics. It's kind of weaponizing that knowledge of shared oppression, weaponizing it to use it to further oppression against one another. Obviously, for this to happen, there's elements of power and privileges. Often when this happens, the victim is usually confused because we go around thinking, oh yeah, somebody who suffers exactly like me or who is experiencing things that I've experienced that negatively and vastly impact and shape my life would not do that to me, would not take advantage of it. So we're often going, what are they thinking? But guess what? A lot of us go about making impulsive decisions, making decisions based on our emotions and feelings. In fact, 90% of such decisions we make are based on 3 basic emotions: sad, angry, and happy. Take note, 2 of those 3 basic emotions are negative. What do you think is going to come out of negatively responding to a social interaction? If you're coming from a place of sadness or from a place of being angry during social interaction, the outcome from social interaction is certainly not going to be positive. Therefore, as I progress to ask for the need to embrace humanization, there is one question I need to ask though. Why are we 90% of the decisions that we make impulsively are based on 3 basic emotions? What happened to being able to name other emotions or connect readily to other emotions, given the range of human experiences? Well, we don't know. According to the research, people are only able to name these 3. So, as we strive to do better, it's important to bear in mind that humanization and dehumanization are real alternatives. Although humanization is constantly negated by injustices, exploitation, oppression, and the violence of the oppressors. For those who are treated as being less human, it often leads them to struggle against those who made them so. For this struggle to have meaning, the oppressed must not, in seeking to regain their humanity, become in turn oppressors, but rather restorers of humanity. That's what Pablo Freire encourages and exhorts us to strive towards. Black people and other oppressed groups of people who engage in lateral violence are oppressors because the effects of their actions do not restore humanity, but perpetuate dehumanization. Now, irrespective of our immediate behavioral response to stress, which probably explains why the impulsive decisions coming from 3 basic emotional bases, we need to be the change we want to see in the world. Our ability to do this is clearly constrained by the neoliberal free market power mechanisms within which we all live that operate psychologically and emotionally, encouraging us to participate individually and believe in individual responsibility. In doing so, we encourage to engage in disciplinary practices such as self-care, self-improvement, and misleading notions of choice and resilience that are not always beneficial to ourselves. What comes readily to my mind is what's referred to in the literature as pathologizing individualism, and that's quite common. Pathologizing individualism is a practice of somebody basically taking individualism to the extreme. They want to do their own thing, cut themselves off from people, essentially engaging in seeing themselves as the primary social unit in society. For us to really begin to address the problem that lateral violence presents, we need to collaborate and we need to transform our negative, adaptive, survivor attitudes and behavior into positive ones. Now, yes, capacity is an issue, and the way we respond to stress is an important piece of the puzzle. When we are in a situation where our ability to deal with a stressful event is compromised, 1 or 2 things might happen. We can, in the immediate, flight, fight, or freeze, or because we've been in a constant state of fight, flight, and freeze, that's all we're doing because our allostatic stress load is topped up. We've not had an opportunity to calm down after our stressors have been aroused. So for those of us who are at that state, we need to take time to take care of ourselves. A part of doing that is seeking professional help if you need it, or engage in continual self-improvement to improve your capacity. In terms of coping ideas, generally we swing back and forth between restorative and loss-oriented coping, like making extra efforts to do better in those areas where we are markedly disadvantaged and striving to achieve our personal goals. So for instance, we're taking action to catch up with knowledge, we are making the most use of our learning and adjusting our communication manner. 2, we're suiting our emotional distress. Now, people do this in different ways, and sometimes some ways are more healthy than others. For this particular research dealing with the nursing profession, student nurses who experience lateral violence reportedly they seek support from their colleagues, their schoolmates. So they're not seeking support from work colleagues, for instance. They're not seeking support from the source of the lateral violence that they're experiencing. Instead, they're seeking support from other people who are the same professional levels as themselves. A number of these nurses, they're living with families and crying alone, and they're adjusting their lifestyle. Clearly, crying alone is not helpful. Bell Hooks encourages us to embrace the love ethic. Quote, refusal to stand up for what you believe in weakens individual and cultural morality and ethics. No wonder then that we are a nation of people, the majority of whom claim to be religious, claim to believe in the divine power of love, and yet collectively remain unable to embrace a love ethic that allow it to guide behavior, especially if doing so would mean supporting radical change. Fear of radical changes lead many citizens of our nation to betray their minds and hearts. Fear is a natural human reaction. How are you managing your fear? Fear is a negative, short-lasting, high-alert emotion in response to a perceived threat. For some people, fear is not short-lasting because the perceived threat is constantly in their lives. So this presentation is really asking you to lean into your fear and your anxiety. Learn and understand why. Why are you afraid? What is the source of your fear? Given that we're talking about perceived threat, is the threat real? Does your perception have a concrete foundation? Be vulnerable. Research suggests labeling emotions as anxiety or excitement depend on interpretation of our bodily sensation. Part of the problem of why we label something as fear or anxiety depends on how we are labeling our bodily sensations that we get from our body, such as coming out of your skin feeling when you're feeling excited or you're feeling anxiety. The same type of sensation. Positive, excitement. Negative, anxiety. So what is it? Take a deep breath. Lean into your fear before deciding what is it. Brené Brown reminds us that vulnerability is our greatest measure of courage for walking through feelings of anxiety, fear, dread, stress, and overwhelming experiences to show up while embracing the excitement of what life has to offer. But as you're embracing that excitement, you need to be able to distinguish that your bodily sensation coming out of your skin is positive, not negative. So in conclusion, what is lateral violence? For people of African descent, lateral violence has its roots in what Dr. DeGroote tells us is post-traumatic slavery syndrome, the collection of multi-generational trauma, what our parents taught us of how they adapt to the difficulties and oppression that they are dealing with. That's part of the milieu of what we're dealing with, plus the ongoing oppression we are handling. Using the frustration and anger of all of that, weaponize it with your own social positioning, your power and privileges. You weaponize it against somebody else that shares the same circumstances just like yourself. Our emotional responses clearly shape our coping tactics, with 90% of our impulsive decisions being based on 3 basic emotions. Cause us to attention for the need to be able to name more emotions, because as human beings we have a range of emotions more than the 3 of sadness, anger, and happiness. But in the meantime, it's worth noting that most of our impulsive decisions may just be coming from a place of sadness or anger. So perhaps let's be less impulsive in the decisions that we're making. We also need to embrace our capability of how we deal with stress. For some of us, we've dealt with so many multiple stressors in our life that our level never reset. So we are permanently stressed out. For those people, please take the time that you need to heal. Slow down. Your body knows. Also, being able to recognize what your body is telling you and being able to interpret your bodily sensation. Fear is a natural human phenomenon. Lean into it. Try to understand what is going on. Let's get better at naming our emotions and the feedback that they are providing us. You don't need to spread misery because you're suffering. We all are. First step, let's continue to have these difficult conversations. So share your story with us. The case studies that are to follow, some of them are from my own personal experiences, because peace is the absence of fear, the presence of justice. Our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. It is our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us. As we are liberated from our own fears, our presence automatically liberates other people. These are the references that informed this video essay. I welcome you to join this conversation. Subscribe, follow, and register in solidarity. Thank you.